The great hall of the Alpha King had been built to intimidate. Stone pillars carved with the victories of ancient wolves stretched toward a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. Torches burned along the walls, their flames flickering gold against polished obsidian floors. Every step echoed here. Every whisper carried. And tonight, there were no whispers. Only laughter. But that came later. At first, there was silence. She was dragged in. Not escorted. Not announced. Dragged. Her boots scraped against the stone floor as two warriors hauled her forward, their grips firm, their expressions already set in quiet contempt. She didn't fight them, didn't struggle. That alone drew attention. Because most did. Most begged. Most cried. Most knew what it meant to be brought before the Alpha King uninvited. But not her. The doors slammed shut behind her. The sound echoed like a final judgment. Every head in the hall turned. Nobles draped in rich furs and gold-threaded garments leaned forward in their seats. Warriors stood along the edges of the chamber, arms crossed, watching with interest sharpened by boredom. And, at the far end, elevated above them all, he sat, still, silent, unmoving, the Alpha King. He did not lean forward. He did not speak. He did not even acknowledge her. But the air around him shifted, heavy, pressurized, like the moment before a storm breaks. The girl was forced to her knees. Her palms hit the cold stone. A faint gasp rippled through the crowd, not out of sympathy, but curiosity. She didn't look like someone who belonged here. Her dress was simple, travel-worn. Dust clung to its hem, and her hair, loosely braided, had come undone in places, strands falling across her face. She wasn't dressed for court. She wasn't dressed for judgment. She looked like she had come from somewhere far away and walked straight into the wrong world. "Speak," one of the council elders snapped. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "State your offense before the Alpha." A pause. Just a breath. But in that breath, something shifted. She lifted her head. Slowly. Not defiant. Not broken. Just certain. Her eyes moved. Not to the council. Not to the crowd. But straight to him. To the Alpha King. And for the first time, he reacted. It was subtle. So subtle most missed it. But not all. Not the ones who knew him. Not the ones who understood what stillness truly meant. Because something in his posture tightened. The girl inhaled. Her voice, when it came, was not loud. But it didn't need to be. It carried. Clear. Steady. Unshaking. "He is my mate." The words settled into the hall like a stone dropped into still water. For a moment, nothing happened. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the torches seemed to hesitate in their flicker. Then, someone laughed. It started small. A single sharp exhale from somewhere in the crowd. Then another. Then another. And suddenly, the entire hall erupted. Laughter crashed against the stone walls, loud and merciless. Nobles covered their mouths, shoulders shaking. Warriors scoffed openly. Someone muttered something crude under their breath, earning a round of low chuckles. Even members of the council exchanged glances of disbelief, thin smiles creeping across their faces. "Your mate?" one nobleman repeated, barely containing his amusement. "Did she hit her head on the way in?" Another added. "She doesn't even smell," claimed. A woman scoffed. "Not even close." The girl didn't react. Not to the laughter. Not to the whispers. Not even to the outright ridicule thrown at her from every direction. Her eyes never left him. That was what made it uncomfortable. That was what made it wrong. Because she wasn't guessing. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't hoping. She was certain. And certainty in a place like this was dangerous. Enough. The voice cut through the laughter instantly. Sharp. Controlled. Absolute. Silence dropped again, but this time, it was heavier. Immediate. Obedient. All eyes turned toward the throne. The Alpha King hadn't moved much. But now, he was looking at her. Fully. Directly. And something in that gaze shifted the air. It wasn't anger. It wasn't amusement. It wasn't even disbelief. It was something far more dangerous. Recognition. The girl felt it. even from where she knelt, even through the weight of the room pressing down on her. Her breath caught, just slightly, because for the first time since she'd spoken, she wasn't the only one who knew. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Subtle, uneasy. They couldn't name it, but they felt it. That shift, that almost invisible fracture in what they believed to be true. The alpha leaned back slightly in his throne, one arm resting against the carved armrest, fingers still, controlled, measured. Explain, he said. Just one word, but it landed heavier than any accusation. The girl swallowed. For the first time, something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, not doubt, pressure. Because now, she had to stand inside her truth, while the entire world tried to crush it. I didn't come here to cause trouble, she said, her voice quieter now, but no less steady. I came because I felt it. A pause. A breath. And when I saw you, her voice softened, just slightly. I knew. Another ripple, stronger this time. The council shifted. Uncomfortable. Because this wasn't how liars spoke. Liars over-explained. They stumbled. They filled silence with noise. She didn't. She stood in it. The alpha watched her. Unblinking. Unreadable. Seconds passed. Long enough to stretch. Long enough to suffocate. Then, he looked away. Just like that. The tension snapped. Confusion flooded the room. What? Someone whispered. That's it, another muttered. The girl's breath hitched. Barely. Because that wasn't what she expected. Not rejection. Not acceptance. Nothing. The Alpha King rose. And the entire hall stilled again. Every instinct screamed that something decisive was about to happen. A verdict. A punishment. A denial that would end this madness once and for all. But instead, he spoke to the guards. Release her. The words landed like a crack through stone. The warriors hesitated. Just for a second. Then obeyed. Her arms were released. She remained on her knees. Frozen. Because now, everything was worse. He hadn't denied her. But he hadn't claimed her either. The Alpha turned. Stepping down from the throne. His presence filled the space as he moved, slow, deliberate, controlled. He passed her. Close enough that she felt it. That pull. That undeniable, bone-deep connection. Her breath caught again. This time, harder. And for the briefest moment, he paused. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her. Then he continued walking. Without another word. Without a claim. Without a denial. Leaving behind a hall full of confusion and a girl who had just changed everything. Without proving anything at all. Because the most dangerous thing wasn't that he rejected her. It was this. He didn't. They would later say it started in the hall. That everything changed the moment she spoke. But that wasn't true. She wasn't born into power. Wasn't raised among warriors or nobles. There were no grand stories tied to her bloodline. No whispered prophecies. No legacy waiting to be fulfilled. Just a small settlement at the edge of packed territory, where wolves lived but didn't matter. Low-ranked. Overlooked. Forgettable. That was where Lyra had learned how to survive. Not by strength. Not by dominance. But by enduring. You keep your head down, her guardian used to tell her. You don't draw attention. You don't make noise. And you never, ever, step out of your place. Lyra had listened. For years she listened. But there was always something off. A feeling she couldn't explain. A quiet pull beneath her skin. Not pain. Not exactly. But something that stirred when the wind shifted. Something that tightened in her chest when certain names were spoken. Something that whispered, not here. At first, she thought it was imagination. Then she thought it was longing. Until it became something else entirely. A direction. It didn't speak in words. Didn't show her visions or dreams. But it pulled. And the closer she moved toward the capital, the stronger it became. Until ignoring it was no longer possible. That was how she ended up here. Standing in a world she had no right to enter. Facing a man she had no right to claim. And saying the one thing that could destroy her. He is my mate. The memory still hung in the air. Even now, even after the laughter had died, because nothing about what followed made sense, Lyra stood where she had been left, still in the center of the great hall, still surrounded, still exposed, but no longer restrained. That alone should have meant something. It didn't, because no one knew what it meant. Not the nobles, who whispered behind jeweled hands. Not the warriors, whose gazes had sharpened with interest. Not even the council, who now leaned toward one another in quiet, urgent discussion. Because there was no precedent for this. In their world, things were simple. The pack was built on order, on hierarchy, on absolute, unquestioned structure. At the top stood the Alpha King, unchallenged, unmatched. Below him, layers of power, alphas, betas, warriors, nobles, each with their place, each with their role. And at the very bottom, those like Lyra, the ones who didn't matter. And above all of it, one truth governed everything. Mates were sacred, not chosen, not negotiated, not claimed through ambition or desire. They were destined, recognized, felt. And when a mate bond existed, it was undeniable. It could not be faked, could not be mistaken, which meant one thing. If someone claimed a mate bond falsely, it wasn't just a lie. It was a crime, a dangerous one, because false claims threatened the very foundation of the pack. They created instability, conflict, chaos. And chaos was something the Alpha King did not tolerate. Punishment for such a claim was swift, public, severe. Everyone in that hall knew it. That was why they had laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Because a girl like her, standing where she stood, claiming him, was impossible. And impossibilities didn't survive here. They were crushed, silenced, erased. That was what everyone expected. But expectation had already been broken. Lyra's fingers curled slightly at her sides. Not from fear, but from something far more complicated. Because beneath the weight of their stares, beneath the whispers, beneath the humiliation still clinging to her skin, that pull remained, stronger now, and it wasn't fading. If anything, it was deepening. Her eyes shifted, just slightly, toward where he had stood. The throne now empty, but the presence still there, lingering, pressing against her senses. She swallowed. He felt it. The thought came uninvited, unwanted, but undeniable. Because when she had looked at him, really looked, something had answered. And it hadn't been one-sided. Interesting. The voice snapped her back. Lyra turned. A woman stood just beyond the edge of the gathering. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed in deep crimson and silver. Her posture alone marked her as high-ranking. Her gaze, sharp, calculating. You're either incredibly brave, the woman continued, stepping closer, or incredibly foolish. Lyra didn't respond. The woman studied her, slowly, deliberately. Do you understand what you've done? She asked. A pause. Lyra met her gaze. Yes. The answer was simple. Too simple. Because it wasn't entirely true. She understood the danger, the consequences, the weight of the claim. But she didn't understand him. And that was the problem. A faint smile touched the woman's lips. Good, she said softly. Then you'll understand what happens next. Before Lyra could respond, a shift rippled through the hall. Subtle, but immediate. Everyone straightened. The whispers died. And then, he returned. The Alpha King stepped back into the hall. And everything changed again. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. Eyes dropped. Bodies stilled. Power didn't need to be announced here. It was felt. And his presence was overwhelming. Lyra felt it before she saw him. That pressure. That weight. That pull. Stronger now. Closer. Her breath slowed. Unintentionally. Because her body recognized him. Even if her mind didn't fully understand. He crossed the hall without hurry. Each step measured. Controlled. No wasted movement. No unnecessary expression. And yet, every eye followed him. Because, when he moved, everything else became secondary.
He stopped.
Not at the throne, but near her, close enough that the air shifted again. Lyra's pulse quickened, just slightly. She didn't lower her gaze, didn't look away. She couldn't. Not when the pull between them had become this undeniable. The silence stretched. Long enough to suffocate. Long enough to force everyone in the room to feel it. That tension. That question. That unspoken truth trying to surface. And still, he said nothing. The council shifted uneasily. One of them finally stepped forward. "My king," the elder began carefully, "this situation requires resolution." A pause. "False claims of this nature cannot be." Enough. The word wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The elder fell silent immediately, stepping back. The alpha's gaze remained on Lyra, unmoving, unrelenting, as if weighing something no one else could see, as if deciding something no one else understood. Lyra held her breath, because this was the moment. This was where it ended. Rejection.
Punishment. Truth.
One of them had to come. It always did. The alpha finally spoke. 3 words. Cold. Measured. Final. Let her stay. The hall froze. Not in silence, but in shock. Because that was not an option. That was not how this worked. You did not allow uncertainty to remain. You did not leave questions unanswered. And you certainly did not allow someone like her to stand unpunished after making a claim like that. But he had. And just like that, the rules shifted. No one understood how. No one understood why. But everyone felt it. Because something had changed. And whatever it was, it hadn't ended. It had only just begun. They didn't touch her again. That was the first sign something was wrong. In a place where rank defined everything. Where even the air seemed to bend around power. Someone like Lyra should not have been allowed to walk freely. And yet,
she did.
Not as an equal. Not as a guest. But as something far more dangerous.
An anomaly.
The girl who claimed the Alpha King.
And lived.
The halls of the fortress changed around her. Not visibly. Not in ways anyone could name. But in the way conversations stopped when she entered. In the way servants avoided her path. In the way warriors looked, not with dismissal anymore, but with interest sharpened by something darker. Suspicion.
Curiosity.
And something that bordered on anticipation. Because everyone was waiting for her to break. It started quietly. A whisper here. A glance there. She's still here. Why hasn't he dealt with her? Maybe he's waiting for her to slip. Lyra heard it all. She kept walking. Head forward. Step steady. But inside, something was shifting. Why isn't he rejecting me? The question came uninvited. Again. And again. Because this wasn't mercy. He didn't look like a man who gave mercy. And yet, he had let her stay. Which meant one thing. There was a reason. And she didn't know what it was. That was what unsettled her. Not the whispers. Not the stares. Him. The way he looked at her. Because he did. Not often. Not openly. But enough. Enough that she felt it. Even when she couldn't see him. That weight. That awareness. Like something watching from just beyond sight. And every time their eyes met, even for a fraction of a second, it happened again. That pull. Stronger now. Deeper. Not imagined. Not mistaken. Real. And it made no sense. Because, if he felt it too, why was he doing nothing? Careful. The voice cut through her thoughts. Lyra stopped. She hadn't realized how close she'd come. A group of warriors stood just ahead, blocking the corridor. Their posture relaxed, but their eyes were not. Waiting. Watching.
Testing.
One of them stepped forward.
Tall. Broad.
Smiling just slightly. "You should watch where you walk," he said casually. Lyra didn't respond. Didn't step back. Didn't lower her gaze. Another mistake. The smile sharpened. "You know," he continued, voice lowering just enough to carry only to those nearby, "most people in your position would be trying very hard not to draw attention." A pause. But then again, most people wouldn't walk into a king's hall and make a claim like that. A few quiet chuckles. Lyra held his gaze. I didn't come here to entertain you, she said. The words were calm, controlled, but they landed. The amusement faded, just slightly. Because she wasn't playing the role they expected. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't breaking. Not yet. Bold. Another voice murmured. Lyra turned. And this time, the air changed. Because she knew, instantly, this was different. The woman approaching wasn't just another observer. She was power. High-ranking. Respected. Dangerous. Her presence alone shifted the behavior of the warriors. They stepped back, not out of fear, but out of recognition. This was someone who didn't need to prove authority. She already had it. Her gaze settled on Lyra. Slow. Measured. Assessing. So, the woman said softly, her voice smooth in a way that didn't comfort, only sharpen the tension. You're the one. Lyra didn't answer.
Didn't need to.
The woman stepped closer. Close enough now that the difference between them became impossible to ignore. Refinement versus survival. Power versus endurance. You've caused quite a stir, she continued. Do you understand what that means? Lyra's jaw tightened slightly. It means people are talking. A faint smile. People always talk, the woman said. What matters is what they decide. A pause. And right now, her gaze flicked briefly toward the throne room beyond. They're deciding whether you're foolish or dangerous. Lyra's chest tightened.
Because those were not the same thing.
And you? Lyra asked quietly. The woman tilted her head. I haven't decided yet. Silence. Heavy. Measured. Then, the woman's expression shifted. Just slightly. Curiosity giving way to something sharper.
Tell me, she said.
When you made your claim, a step closer. Did you expect him to accept you? There it was. The question everyone wanted answered. Lyra's throat tightened. Because the truth was complicated.
No, she said.
The answer surprised even her. A flicker of something crossed the woman's face. Interest. Then what did you expect? She pressed. Lyra hesitated. Just for a moment. Because now, she didn't know. And that uncertainty was dangerous. I expected the truth to matter, she said finally. The silence that followed was different. Not mocking. Not amused. Just still. Then, the woman laughed.
Soft.
Controlled. Cold. Oh, she said, almost gently. That's where you're wrong. And then, louder, so others could hear. You're nothing, she said. The words cut clean.
Precise.
Nothing this pack would ever accept.
A shift.
People were watching now.
Closely.
Waiting. For all your confidence, the woman continued, her voice rising just enough to draw the room in. You forget something very simple. She leaned closer. Close enough that only Lyra could feel the full weight of it. He would never choose you. The words landed. And this time, they hit. Not because Lyra believed them, but because they might be true. And for the first time, doubt cracked through. Just slightly. Just enough. The room held its breath. Waiting.
For her to break. For her to react.
For her to prove them right. Lyra didn't move.
Didn't speak.
But inside, everything tightened. Because the question was louder now. Why isn't he choosing me?
A shift. Subtle.
But immediate. The woman straightened. Her expression flickered. Because something had changed.
The air.
The tension. The weight pressing into the room. Lyra felt it.
Before she saw it.
That presence. That pull. Stronger now. Closer. And then, silence. The kind that didn't come from fear, but from instinct. Every head turned. He was there. No announcement. No warning. Just presence. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the corridor, watching. His gaze moved between them, slowly, taking everything in. The woman's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. Respect. Caution. But not retreat. Not yet. My king, she said smoothly, inclining her head. He didn't respond. Didn't acknowledge her words. His attention was elsewhere. On Lyra. Again. Always. The silence stretched. Long enough to build. Long enough to tighten every nerve in the room. Because now, this was it. This was where he corrected everything, where he dismissed her, where he proved them right. He stepped forward. 1 step.
2.
Stopping just close enough. Close enough that Lyra could feel the heat of him, the gravity of him. Close enough that the pull between them surged. And still, he said nothing. His gaze flicked briefly to the woman, then back to Lyra. A decision. Invisible, but final. He turned and walked away.
Just like that.
No correction. No denial. No acknowledgment. Nothing. But the tension he left behind was louder than any words. The woman's smile had faded. The room had shifted. And this time, everyone felt it. Because this wasn't indifference anymore. This was something else. Something far more dangerous. Because the Alpha King had seen everything and chosen
not to stop it.
That night, the fortress didn't sleep. Not fully. It never did. But something about the air felt charged, unsettled. Lyra sat alone. The room she'd been given was small,
bare,
unadorned. Not a place of comfort. A place of waiting. She stared at the floor. The events of the day replaying in fragments. The laughter. The challenge. The words. You're nothing. Her chest tightened. Because for the first time, she didn't dismiss it completely. Not after today. Not after him. Her eyes closed. And that was when it happened. The pull. Stronger than before. Sharp. Immediate. Not distant. Not vague. Focused. Directed. Her breath caught. Because this time, it wasn't just her. Somewhere. Not far. He felt it too. And for the first time, the bond didn't whisper. It answered. Because whatever this connection was, it was no longer one-sided. Something had shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. But beneath the surface of the fortress, beneath the rigid structure that had governed everything for generations, a fracture had formed. And fractures did not stay small. It happened without warning. No summons. No announcement. Just a presence. Lyra felt it before she saw him. That pull again. Stronger now.
Sharper.
It dragged her attention toward the doorway of her chamber. Before the door even opened. And then,
it did. Slowly.
No guards. No witnesses. Just him. The Alpha King stepped inside. And the air changed. The small room seemed to shrink under the weight of his presence. Shadows deepened. The silence thickened. Lyra stood. Instinctively. Not out of fear. Out of something far more dangerous. Recognition. The door shut behind him.
Soft.
Final. No escape. Not that she tried. Because something inside her wouldn't let her. He didn't move at first. Just stood there. Watching. And for the first time, there was no audience. No court. No whispers. No expectations. Just truth. And whatever this was between them, Lyra held his gaze. Her pulse was steady, but her body was not. Because being this close to him felt different. The pull wasn't distant anymore. It was immediate. Alive. He stepped forward. 1 step. The floor didn't creak. The air didn't stir. But everything inside her reacted. He stopped just short of her. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. Close enough that breathing felt deliberate. His voice, when it came, was low, controlled, dangerous. Why did you say that? No accusation. No anger. Just a question. But it carried weight. Because he wasn't asking about the words. He was asking about the truth behind them. Lyra didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. Because it's true. The silence that followed was different. Not empty.
Tight.
Like something had just locked into place. His gaze sharpened. Searching. Testing. As if trying to find the flaw.
The lie.
The hesitation. He stepped closer. Too close now. Close enough that the space between them disappeared. Lyra's breath caught. Not from fear. From instinct. Because something in her body recognized him in a way her mind couldn't explain. He watched it happen. That shift. That reaction. And something in his expression changed. Just slightly. Interest.
No.
Confirmation. His hand lifted. Slowly. Deliberately. as if testing something unseen. And Lyra didn't move, didn't step back, didn't break. Even as every nerve in her body screamed, "This matters." His fingers hovered just above her skin, not touching.
Not yet.
The space between them felt charged,
Alive.
waiting. And then, she leaned forward, just slightly, not consciously, not intentionally. Instinct.
Pure.
Unfiltered. The moment stretched. And that was when he stopped. His hand dropped. Abrupt. Controlled. As if something had almost happened. And he refused to let it. The tension snapped. Lyra blinked. Confusion breaking through the haze. Because she felt it. That pull. That connection. And now, she knew. He felt it too. He stepped back.
Distance. Control.
Reasserted. But it was too late. The truth had already surfaced. "You don't understand what you're claiming," he said quietly. Lyra's chest tightened. "I understand enough." His gaze hardened. "No," he said. "You don't."
A pause.
Something unspoken passed between them. Something heavier than words. Then, he turned and walked out, just like before. But this time, it was different. Because now, she knew. This wasn't uncertainty. This wasn't indifference. This was restraint. And restraint only existed when there was something to control. The shift didn't stay contained. It never did. By morning, the tension had spread. Through the halls.
Through the guards.
Through the whispers that now carried a different tone. Because something else had entered the equation.
Threat.
It came as word first. A rival pack.
Close.
Too close. Border movement. Unexplained. Aggressive. And in a world built on power, that meant only one thing. Challenge. The fortress moved quickly. Warriors mobilized. Messengers ran. Orders were given. And Lyra was suddenly very aware of how exposed she was, because she didn't belong to this structure, didn't have protection, didn't have allies. And now, she had attention. The wrong kind. It happened fast. Too fast to predict. She was crossing the lower courtyard when it shifted.
The air.
That subtle warning. That instinct. Too late. A hand grabbed her arm.
Hard.
She was pulled back. Off balance. Into shadow. Her breath caught. But she didn't scream. Because something told her that would make it worse. Careless. A voice muttered near her ear. Not mocking. Cold. Deliberate. Another figure stepped into view. Not fortress guards. Not hers. Outsiders. The message was clear. She was a weakness. And weaknesses were exploited. "You shouldn't have come here," the first voice continued. Lyra's pulse quickened. But her mind was sharp. Because now, it made sense. This wasn't random. This was calculated. She had become a variable. And someone wanted it removed. The grip on her tightened. Pain flared. And for a moment, just a moment, fear broke through. Because this was real. There would be no court here. No witnesses. No protection. Unless the air shifted. Violently. The men froze. Not by choice. By instinct. Because something had entered the space. That outranked everything. Lyra felt it. Before she saw him. That pull. Exploding now. Uncontained. The grip on her arm disappeared. Abrupt. Because the man holding her was no longer focused on her. He was focused on survival. The Alpha King stepped into the courtyard. And for the first time, there was no restraint. His presence wasn't controlled. It was unleashed.
Raw.
Dominant.
Terrifying.
The attackers stepped back. Not strategizing. Reacting. Because this was not a fight they could win. Lyra didn't move.
Couldn't.
Because something in her
Locked onto him.
not fear. Recognition. Possession. The Alpha's gaze swept over the scene. Calculated. Efficient. Then, it landed on her. And everything else disappeared. Something broke. Just slightly. Just enough. Because for the first time, his control slipped. Not completely. But enough to be seen. To be felt. He moved.
Fast.
closing the distance in a blur of motion. The attackers didn't get a second chance. They didn't even get a fight, because this wasn't a battle. It was a message. And the message was clear. She was not unprotected. She was not expendable. She was
His.
The courtyard fell silent. Guards rushed in.
Late.
Witnesses gathered.
Too late to stop it.
Just in time to see it. Because now, everyone knew. Something had changed. The Alpha stood beside her.
Close.
Too close. His presence wrapped around her like something unseen, but undeniable. And this time, he didn't step away immediately. His gaze remained on her. Longer than it should. Longer than was safe. The tension in the air thickened. Because now, this wasn't subtle. This wasn't hidden. This was visible. And visible things couldn't be ignored. His jaw tightened. And for the briefest moment, just a flicker, he lost control. Not in action, but in restraint. And that was far more dangerous. Because the Alpha King wasn't just watching anymore. He was starting to claim, without saying a word. Power, once revealed, does not go unnoticed. What happened in the courtyard did more than silence whispers. It changed them. Because now, they weren't asking if something was happening. They were asking what. And more importantly,
Why?
the fortress had always thrived on certainty, hierarchy, order, control. But Lyra's presence, and the Alpha King's reaction to it, had begun to unravel that certainty. Quietly, dangerously, because nothing destabilizes power faster than something that cannot be explained. It happened the next night, not in the open, not in the court, but in the same place truths always surface, in silence. Lyra didn't wait this time. She felt him before he came. That pull again, but sharper now, more insistent, like something no longer asking, but demanding. The door opened, and he stepped inside. No hesitation, no distance, just presence. And this time, Lyra didn't step back, didn't hesitate, because something inside her had shifted too. The questions were no longer quiet. They were loud, demanding answers. You knew. The words came before anything else. No greeting, no hesitation, just truth, thrown between them. The Alpha stopped, not surprised, not defensive, just still. Lyra stepped closer, her chest rising and falling, not from fear, but from something deeper, something sharper. You knew, she repeated, from the beginning. Silence, not denial, confirmation, because he didn't correct her, didn't argue, didn't dismiss it. He simply looked at her. And that was answer enough. Something in Lyra's chest tightened, not from confusion, from realization. You felt it in the hall, she said, her voice quieter now, but no less intense. When I said it, you already knew. A pause. Then, finally, he spoke. Yes. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed exactly where it needed to. And everything inside her shifted. Because doubt was no longer an option. The truth was real. The bond was real.
And he had known.
All along. Then why? She demanded. The question broke through.
Raw.
Unfiltered. Why didn't you say anything? She continued, stepping closer, her voice rising now, not in anger alone, but in something far more personal. Why didn't you stop them? Her breath hitched. Why did you let them laugh? There it was. The real wound. Not the doubt. Not the danger. The humiliation. The silence. The moment she stood alone, while he watched. The Alpha's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted.
Subtle.
But real. Because this was not a question of power. This was something else. Because it changes everything, he said. His voice was low, measured, controlled. But beneath it, there was tension. Because once it is acknowledged, he continued, his gaze sharpening, it cannot be undone. Lyra shook her head. That's not an answer. It is the only answer that matters. The words were firm, final, but not cold, not entirely, because now, there was something else beneath them. Conflict.
Real.
Unresolved. You let them tear me apart, she said quietly. And this time, he didn't interrupt. You let them believe I was nothing, she continued, her voice steady, but her eyes no longer were. You stood there and said nothing. A pause. You knew, and you let it happen. Silence. Heavy, because there was no defense for that. Not one she would accept. The alpha stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. And this time, he didn't stop. He closed the distance completely. Close enough that she had to tilt her head slightly to hold his gaze. You think this is about them? He said quietly. Lyra's breath caught, because the tone had changed. Not louder, not harsher, but deeper, more dangerous. This was never about them. His gaze locked onto hers. Unrelenting. This is about control. A pause. And what happens when I lose it? The words hung between them, not as a warning, but as a truth. And for the first time, Lyra understood. Not fully, but enough. Because this wasn't hesitation. This wasn't doubt. This was restraint. And restraint only existed when something beneath it threatened to break free. But the truth didn't stop there. It never did. Because one revelation always led to another. You feel it, he said. Not a question. A statement. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Yes. A pause. And it's getting stronger. Another statement. Another truth. Yes. His gaze narrowed slightly, as if measuring something unseen. Calculating. You shouldn't be able to handle it this well, he said. The words were quiet, but they shifted everything. Lyra frowned. What does that mean? Silence. Too long. Too deliberate. Because now, he was deciding something. And whatever it was, it mattered. You're not what you think you are, he said finally. The words landed slowly. Not loud, but heavy. Lyra stilled. What does that mean? This time, her voice wasn't steady. Because now, the ground beneath her was shifting again. You shouldn't have survived the bond this long without breaking, he continued. Not with your rank. Not with your upbringing. A pause. Which means he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Because the implication was already there. Something about her didn't match what the world believed. Something hidden. Something suppressed. Something powerful. Lyra took a step back. Not from him. From the truth. Because now, it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her. Then what am I? She asked. The question was quiet, but it carried everything. Every doubt. Every fracture. Every piece of identity she thought she understood. The alpha didn't answer. Not fully. Not yet. Because some truths were not given. They were uncovered. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Because everything between them was no longer hidden. You knew, Lyra said again. But this time, it wasn't a question. It was an accusation. And you still let them humiliate me. Her voice cracked. Just slightly. And that was enough. Because now, this wasn't about power. It was personal. The alpha's jaw tightened. For the first time, visibly. Because this was the part he couldn't control. Not her reaction. Not her pain. Not the consequences of his silence. And that was something he was not used to. He turned slightly. Not away, but enough to create distance. Because distance meant control. And control was everything. This bond, he said slowly, is not simple. A pause. It affects more than just us. Lyra's gaze hardened. Then maybe you should have thought about that before letting them treat me like I didn't matter. The words hit, because they were true. And truth was the one thing even he could not overpower. Outside, the fortress was shifting again. Whispers had become conversations. Conversations had become concerns. And concerns were becoming threats. Because rival packs had noticed. Because power imbalance was dangerous. And because an unclaimed mate, connected to the Alpha King, was a weakness others would exploit. The claim was no longer just personal. It was political. and political instability always led to conflict. The air between them tightened. The bond pulsed again, stronger, unstable, uncontained. Lyra inhaled sharply, because this time, it hurt, not physically, but deeper, like something stretching too far, like something beginning to fracture. The alpha felt it too. His expression shifted, for the first time, without control, because this was not supposed to happen. Not yet. Not like this. If I don't claim you soon, he said quietly. A pause. Heavy. Final. It will break. Silence. Because now, the truth was no longer hidden. It was urgent. And whatever came next would not be a choice. Because the bond that tied them together was starting to tear itself apart. The fortress had seen trials before. Judgments. Public reckonings where truth was not discovered, but enforced. But this felt different, because no one was entirely sure what truth they were about to witness. The great hall filled faster than usual. Word had spread, not through official channels, not through command, but through something far more powerful, anticipation. Nobles took their seats early, their conversations hushed but sharp. Warriors lined the edges of the chamber, posture rigid, eyes alert. Even the council carried a tension that hadn't been there before, because this was no longer a curiosity. It was a problem, and problems in a structure like this had to be resolved. Lyra stood at the center again. The same place, the same stone beneath her feet. But nothing about this moment felt the same, because now she understood the stakes. And more importantly, she understood him. Or, at least, the part of him he had tried to keep hidden. Her chest rose slowly. The bond pulsed again. Unstable. Not as sharp as before, but not calm either. Waiting. The doors opened, and silence fell instantly. The Alpha King entered. This time, there was no hesitation in the room. Everyone stood, not out of formality, out of instinct, because something about him had changed. His presence was heavier, sharper, less restrained. He took his place at the throne, but he didn't sit immediately. His gaze moved across the hall, taking everything in. Then, it landed on her, and stayed there, long enough to make the entire room feel it. That connection, that tension, that unspoken truth, hovering just beneath the surface. My king. The voice came from the same woman, the one who had challenged Lyra before. Composed, controlled, but beneath it, there was urgency now. This situation cannot continue, she said, stepping forward. The integrity of the pack is at stake. A pause. She has made a claim that remains unproven. Her gaze flicked toward Lyra. Sharp, precise. And in doing so, she has disrupted the order of this court. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the hall. Because this was the argument they understood. Order, stability, hierarchy. She must either prove her claim, the woman continued, or face the consequences of false declaration. The words landed heavily, because now, the rules had returned. Clear, defined. And for the first time since Lyra arrived, there was a path forward, or an ending. Lyra's breath slowed. Her hands remained at her sides. But inside, everything tightened. Because this was what she had been walking toward. The moment where truth was no longer enough. It had to be proven. How? Lyra asked quietly. The question cut through the tension. The woman's lips curved faintly. A true mate bond, she said, cannot be hidden. A pause. It reveals itself when both parties acknowledge it. Silence. All eyes turned, not to Lyra, but to him. Because now, everything rested on a single point. Acknowledgment. The Alpha King said nothing. Did not move. Did not react. And that was enough. Because silence in this moment was not neutrality. It was refusal. A shift moved through the crowd. Subtle, but unmistakable. They had their answer. And it wasn't the one she needed. Something inside Lyra cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. Because this This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment where everything would become clear. And instead, nothing. Her throat tightened. Not from fear. From something far more difficult to contain. Disappointment. Because she had believed, despite everything, that when it mattered, he would choose the truth. Her eyes lowered. Just slightly. And that was the first time it happened. The first time she didn't hold his gaze. The first time she stepped back. Not physically, but emotionally. "I understand," she said quietly. The words were steady. Too steady. Because they weren't acceptance. They were release. "If that's what you've decided." A pause. "Then I won't stand here and beg for something that should already be known." The hall stilled. Because this wasn't what they expected. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't defending herself. She was walking away. Lyra turned. Slowly. Deliberately. And began to move toward the doors. Each step measured. Each step heavier than the last. Because with every movement, something inside her was letting go. The bond pulsed again. Sharp. Painful. But she didn't stop. Didn't look back. Because she had already made her decision. If he wouldn't claim her, then she would not stay to be broken by it. The moment stretched. Too long. Too far. And then, it broke. Not in her. In him. Stop. The word wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. It hit the room like a force. Lyra froze. Not by choice. By instinct. Because something in that single word was no longer controlled. The air shifted violently. The pressure in the room surged. And for the first time, everyone felt it. Not just power. Possession. The Alpha King stood. Slowly. Deliberately. But there was nothing restrained about it anymore. The room fell into absolute silence. No whispers. No movement. Because this was something none of them had ever seen before. His gaze locked onto her. Unyielding. Unmistakable. And then, he moved. Fast. Crossing the distance between them before anyone could react. His hand closed around her wrist. Firm. Unavoidable. He pulled her back. Not gently, but not harshly either. With certainty. With finality. Lyra's breath caught. Because this was different. This wasn't hesitation. This wasn't restraint. This was decision. He turned her to face him. Close. Too close. The bond surged, wild now, uncontrolled. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. The hall. The people. The judgment. All of it, gone. Because, in this moment, there was only truth. And it refused to be hidden any longer. His voice cut through the silence. Clear. Absolute. She is mine. No hesitation. No ambiguity. No room for doubt. The words didn't echo. They settled. Into every corner of the hall. Into every mind. Into every belief that had existed before this moment. And shattered it. He didn't step back. Didn't release her. Instead, he pulled her closer. One hand steady at her back. Grounding. Anchoring. Claiming. The connection between them surged. No longer unstable. But fully realized. Visible. Undeniable. Not through spectacle, but through presence. Through the shift in the air. Through the way every instinct in the room reacted at once. Recognizing something ancient. Something binding. Something real. Lyra felt it. Fully. For the first time. Without resistance. Without doubt. And it changed everything. Silence. Complete. Then, shock. Raw. Unfiltered. The council sat frozen. The nobles stared. The warriors lowered their gazes. Because they understood. Not the details. Not the reasons. But the truth. And truth, once revealed, could not be undone. The woman who had challenged her stood motionless. Her composure gone. Because everything she had said, everything she had believed, had just been destroyed. In a single moment. The shift was immediate. Palpable. Absolute. Where there had been mockery, there was now silence. Where there had been doubt, there was now submission. Heads bowed. Not slowly. Not reluctantly. Instinctively. because the hierarchy had corrected itself. And Lyra was no longer at the bottom. But power always comes with consequence. The bond had stabilized. The claim had been made. The truth had been revealed. But outside these walls, the world was watching. And not everyone would accept this outcome. Lyra felt it, even in this moment. That shift. That change. Because this was not the end of the conflict. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because the moment he claimed her publicly, he didn't just choose her, he challenged everything. The night did not feel like an ending. It never did when power shifted hands. It felt like the moment after a storm has passed, but before anyone realizes what has been washed ashore. The air still carried the weight of what had happened earlier. The public marking, the exposure, the way every gaze had turned toward her as if she had been rewritten in real time, no longer unseen, no longer dismissible, no longer safe in the anonymity she once clung to. Now she stood in the aftermath of it all, and the world, somehow, had begun to adjust around her. The corridor outside the chamber was too quiet. Not empty, never empty. Guards were present. Advisors lingered in the distance. Even the walls seemed occupied by invisible observers, as though the entire structure had learned her name and refused to forget it. She moved forward slowly, each step heavier than the last. Not because she was weak, because something inside her had changed shape. A door opened ahead without warning. Not for permission. For recognition. 2 guards stepped aside immediately. No hesitation. No questioning. No delay. That alone made her stomach tighten. Because she noticed it now, the difference in how she was treated. The invisible recalibration of authority that had happened overnight, like the world had quietly rewritten its hierarchy and forgotten to inform her. Or perhaps it had informed her, just not in words. She reached the inner hall and stopped. Reflections lined the polished surface of the walls. And for a moment, she didn't recognize herself. Not fully. There was still her face, still her eyes, but the space around her image felt heavier, sharper. As if something unseen stood just behind her reflection, watching through her. A presence that did not belong to her alone. You're doing that thing again. The voice came from behind her. Low. Controlled. Familiar. She didn't turn immediately. Because she already knew who it was. You mean standing like I don't belong here? She asked quietly. A pause. Then, no, he said. Like you're deciding whether you should run. That made her turn. He was there, just at the edge of the hall, where shadow met light. Still composed. Still impossibly steady. Still dangerous in a way that didn't announce itself. It simply existed, like gravity. Her throat tightened before she spoke. I don't know what I am anymore. That was the truth. It left her mouth before she could stop it. A silence stretched between them. Not awkward. Measured. As if he was choosing which version of honesty to return. Finally, you're what you've always been, he said. And what is that? She pressed. His gaze didn't waver. Someone who survived long enough to become a problem for everyone else. That should have comforted her. It didn't. Because survival was not the same as belonging. And power was not the same as safety. Her fingers curled slightly at her side. I feel it, she admitted. His eyes narrowed just slightly. That's the part you should be careful with. Feeling what? A step closer now. Not threatening, but closing distance in a way that made the air shift. The bond, he said simply. The word landed like a weight. Not new, not unfamiliar, but now undeniable. Her breath caught, because she had tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize it, tried to bury it under logic, fear, anger, anything that would make it smaller. But it was no longer small. It was alive. You said I could walk away, she whispered. I said you had a choice, he corrected. That sounds the same. It isn't. Another silence. This one heavier. More personal. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not weakness, not softness exactly, but something closer to restraint loosening at the edges. Like a chain not breaking but being loosened on purpose. You're not being hunted anymore, he said. That's not true. His gaze sharpened. No, he agreed. It isn't. but not in the way you think. She frowned slightly. What does that mean? It took him a moment to answer. When people realize what you are now, he said slowly, they won't try to erase you. Her pulse tightened. They'll try to own me. He didn't deny it. And that silence was worse than confirmation. For a moment, something passed across his face. Something almost human. Not regret. Not guilt. Something closer to awareness. I didn't choose this timing, he said quietly. Her eyes flicked up. For what? His voice lowered. For when you awakened. That word again. Awakened. As if something had been sleeping inside her this entire time, waiting for the world to become unstable enough to notice it existed. Her chest felt tight. And you knew, she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. The hall behind them suddenly felt larger, as if space itself had expanded to accommodate what was coming. Far away, footsteps echoed. Multiple, controlled, intentional, not guards, not servants. Something more structured, more political. She turned slightly, instinctively. Who's coming, she asked. His gaze remained forward. People who didn't believe the reports. And now, a faint exhale from him. Now they're coming to see if they were wrong. Her stomach tightened. And if they weren't, a pause. Then they decide what to do with you. The words settled between them like a verdict not yet spoken aloud. Her pulse quickened, but not in fear alone. Something else threaded through it now. Recognition. Because this wasn't the beginning of danger. It was the beginning of scale. Before, she had been beneath notice. Now, she was central to it. And that changed everything. They moved, without discussing it, down the corridor, away from the incoming presence. Not escape. Positioning. As if instinct itself had reorganized their decisions without permission. Eventually, they reached a smaller chamber. Quieter. Dimmer. A place where the world felt distant again. For the first time since everything shifted, there was silence that didn't feel like pressure. Just space. She leaned lightly against the edge of a stone ledge, exhaling slowly. Her hands trembled slightly. She hated that they did. He noticed. Of course he did. But he didn't comment. Instead, he stood a few feet away. Not close enough to overwhelm her. Not far enough to abandon her. You're holding back, she said suddenly. His gaze flicked toward her. From what? From saying what this makes you feel. A faint pause. Then, I don't have the luxury of naming everything I feel. That sounds like avoidance. It's discipline. She let out a quiet, humorless breath. You really think control fixes everything? His eyes held hers. No, he said. I think control is what keeps everything from collapsing at the wrong time. That landed harder than expected, because she understood it too well. A long silence stretched, then softer. You marked me, she said. Not accusation, not question, just truth laid bare. His jaw tightened slightly. Yes. That changes things. It already did. She looked down for a moment, then back up. And now, a beat. The faintest shift in his expression again. Not distance, not dominance. Something quieter, more restrained, more present. Now, he said, you learn what it means. Her breath caught slightly. Outside the chamber, distant voices grew louder. The world approaching again. Closing in. She straightened. Whatever comes next, she said carefully, I'm not going back to who I was. A faint pause. Then he nodded once. Not approval. Recognition. Good, he said, because going back would have been the real death. He stepped slightly closer then. Not enough to trap her. Enough to be heard without the world between them. His voice lowered. Controlled. Almost quiet. You wanted the truth, he murmured. Her eyes held his. The footsteps outside grew sharper. Closer. And now you'll have to survive it.